Well, hey everybody, we're out doing a little night ride here in Atlanta. I think we'll have enough light, hopefully, so that it'll be worth watching. Some of the professional buildings and apartments on top of them, which is kind of cool. You know, it'd be kind of cool to have a bar, or probably better be have a nice little restaurant underneath you. A couple floors down, you could just walk down and get a meal or whatever you wanted to do down there. What I thought I'd talk about, if it's not too dark so that you can't see. Oh, there we got, yeah, going over, there's a highway. I don't know if you can see it. We're going over the highway. But some of the first things I rode on as a kid, I've told you before, I don't really have a lot of history with motorcycles until I went off to school in college, and that was when I was able to get my first motorcycle, because my parents were great to me, but they just wouldn't allow me to have a motorcycle when I was living at home. So I kind of had to get one on the sly. Well, previous to that though, they were really good about everything else. I guess the first thing I ever had was besides just your normal bicycles and all that, but the first thing I had that was powered was a go-kart. And I'd asked my dad, he wouldn't let me have a mini bike. And so I said, well, how about a go-kart? And he said, yeah, I'll get you a go-kart. So I think for my birthday or Christmas, he got one. Well, he bought one from a guy where he worked, and this thing had apparently it was one of these racing go-karts. It had a 7 or 8 horsepower 2-stroke engine on it, and it would rev like nobody's business. And he didn't of course put it on there for me to, to ride as a, gosh, I don't know how old I was, what, 9, 10 years old, if that old. So that thing probably run 50, 60 miles an hour with that motor on it. So he took that motor off, and I think they put the usual 3.5 horsepower Briggs & Stratton engine, which was pretty normal for mini bikes and go-karts at that time. And this had been back in the 60s, early 60s, and late 50s, early 60s. And but he kept that 2-stroke motor, and later on, a few years later, I found it and would bolt it down to his workbench out in his little shop he had that was attached to the house, and finally figured out how to crank that thing up. And let me tell you, it absolutely roared. I don't even think it had an exhaust on it. I think it was just open right off the head. And I'd fire that thing up and rev it up a couple of times, and it would vibrate everything that was on his workbench, and most of the stuff that was on the wall hanging over it off on the ground. I'd have to pick it all up. And he finally got tired of that, and neighbors complaining and everything else, so he got rid of it. But had the go-kart for a long time. I had a lot of fun with it. I rode it all over the place. Pretty much, I guess that's what taught me to drive, was riding it. And I did have one funny little thing happen. I switched over with a guy. I think there were 5 of us, and we had like 4 mini bikes and my go-kart. Maybe I think, well, no, we didn't have quite enough. We were one short, because on this particular occasion I was having to stand by and watch everybody else ride, and they would, like kids would do, they'd run at you and at the last minute peel off, that kind of thing. And the kid who was riding my go-kart did that and ran right over me. He caught me right at the ankles, and I went flying up in the air and went over the top of the go-kart, and somehow, I don't know what I cut my finger on, cut my wrist on, but something on the engine somewhere. As I went over, I put my hand down, and right at the wrist bone where it goes into your hand, I cut it all the way down to the bone. You could see the bone. Not a real long gash, but a real deep one. You could see it. And, that thing did not bleed a drop. It did not bleed one drop of blood. And I went on home. It didn't even really hurt much, and I still can't explain why, but that thing never did hurt. It never hurt when it was healing up. It never hurt. I didn't even go to the doctor. We just put a Band-Aid on it. Pulled it across there. Like I said, it was only wasn't even an inch long. It was probably 3/4 of an inch long, but it was a deep cut. But like I said, it didn't bleed, so there wasn't any point in doing anything to it. So we just put a bandage on it, and about 2 weeks later, it had all closed up good, and I've still got the scar there. You can't see it, but it's on my right wrist there. But after the go-kart, I got a Rupp mini bike, And it was, Rupp was a real big brand back then. It still had the 3.5 horsepower engine on it. And that's really where I learned how to ride on 2 wheels with power. And that thing was pretty quick. When I could get my dad to take me, we'd go and mess around with we'd go pick up some extra sprockets and chain. And the first thing we did was take the muffler off of it, that little short Briggs muffler, and get a 6-inch piece of plumbing pipe. I think it was 3/4. I don't think it was quite an inch. And put that on there, and man, that thing would, man, it sounded good. And you know, it was funny, you'd ride that thing along, especially at night, like right now, and you'd look back, you'd look down underneath between your knees, because that's where that motor was. And that pipe would just be glowing red hot. It would be just as red as anything you could see. As red as that light there. And it was really cool. And it'd throw sparks out and everything else. But that's what I spent all my time riding on.